Sorry about that. Let's see. So I'm on. Oh, here's a clicker again. Well, thank you all so much. I'm honored to be here. I'm enormously grateful to the work that all of you are doing. We got two things going simultaneously. Okay. Thank you, sir. This is maybe the most interesting and consequential city in America, and all of us are. Whoops, something's still going on here. Is this one on? Okay, all right. Let me see if I can make that. See if I can make this. So I want to just remind us of how dramatically different the world has become, how Houston is at the forefront of the transformations that are occurring across all of America, nowhere more clearly seen than in Houston, Texas. We've been doing a survey for 34 years. Let's see, there is the spindle top, right, between 1982 1900 and 1982, Houston was booming, riding the resource of the industrial age. 82% of the jobs in Houston were tied into the price of oil. The barrel of oil increased tenfold in value in the 1970s. This was boomtown America. It was also a city world famous for having imposed the least amount of controls on development of any city in the Western world. No zoning, no regulations. Who cares if it smells? It's a smell of money. Come on down. So we did a one-time survey to measure how are people balancing this incredible growth with growing concerns about traffic, pollution, crime. This is going to move. Let's see. There we go. One of my favorite quotes. I'm going to have to come down here to read it. The ideological thrust in Houston in the 20th century has been anti-government, anti-regulation, anti-planning, anti-taxes, anti-anything that seemed to represent, in fact or fantasy, the diminution in the power of the business community. This was a businessman's town. Short-term profits, that's what we did down here. One-time survey to measure how are people balancing this incredible growth with growing concerns about what kind of city are we building. And 2 months later, the oil boom collapsed. Houston went into major recession and then recovered into a restructured economy and a demographic revolution. And I want to touch as quickly as I can just to remind us of how dramatic and profound have been the changes. These are changes occurring across all of America, nowhere more clearly seen or more sharply articulated than here in Houston, Texas. Here very quickly, let's see. We ask people, what's the biggest problem facing people in the Houston area? A random sample each year. This is the percent saying traffic is the biggest problem. At the beginning, of course, with the oil boom, 1,380 people a week pouring into the city, 230 cars and trucks every day on the streets and freeways. Traffic was the biggest problem. Traffic drops with the collapse of the oil boom, comes up again, and then has now reached the highest percentage, as you'll see in a moment. More people say traffic is the biggest problem than anything anywhere else, and that's going to be the story of Houston for much of the next period of years, I think. Here is the economy, peaking at the depths of the recession in 1987. One out of every 7 jobs that had been in Houston in 1982 disappeared by 1987. The worst regional recession of any part of the country at any time since World War II, in a city that had known nothing but economic boom from its beginnings until the fateful date of May 1982, when the world that Houston inhabited changed forever. And then recovery, and then the recession in the turn of the century, and then here was crime peaking in 1995 with the crack cocaine epidemic. Concern about crime has gone up and down, but now, as I say, traffic is the biggest problem. We ask people directly, how would you rate traffic in these? I'm going to come down here so I can see what's going on. We asked people over the past 3 years, has traffic in your area gotten better, gotten worse, or has it stayed about the same? 65% today say it's gotten worse more than ever before. And then we said, what's the best solution to the traffic problems? Building bigger and better highways, developing communities where people can live closer to where they work and shop, or making major improvements in transit. Transit, of course, wins out, but what's interesting to see is the percent saying improve the roads and freeways has gone down in these last 4 years, in those 4 years of surveys, and support for walkable urbanism has gone up. I'll come back to that in just a minute when we look at the And then, okay, oh, it's already changed. Okay, back, wait, hold on. This is a reminder of the tremendous inequalities that have occurred in America. This is the 30 years after World War II, when the rising tide lifted all boats. We emerged out of World War II, the sole economic power on the planet. All of our potential competitors were decimated by the war experience. The poorest 20% of American families doubled their incomes between 1950 and 1970. The richest 5% doubled theirs. The rising tide lifted all boats. 38% of all the jobs in America were union jobs. The unions could negotiate with the companies to ensure that workers shared in the prosperity of the corporations. And the rising tide lifted all boats. Those were the years when we celebrated the stay-at-home housewife mother in suburbia. The average American woman between 1946 and 1964 gave birth to 3.6 children on average. And the baby boom was launched upon the land, preceded and followed by baby bust generations. So for 60 years, it's been this bulge going through the American system. Demographers talk about it like a pig being swallowed by a python. Not very healthy, either for the pig or the python. The leading edge of those 76 million babies born in that incredible period after World War II, the leading edge turns 70 this year. And we are going to watch a literal doubling of the number of Americans over the age of 65 in the next 25 years. Every day between now and 2030, 10,000 Americans will turn 65. And we're watching this remarkable process, and they are overwhelmingly Anglo babies. We are in the midst of a fundamental, epic transition from a generation largely of Anglos increasing, rapidly aging, and being replaced by a very different generation of Americans in the 21st century. Nowhere, again, more clearly seen than in Houston. Here, very quickly, is the last 30 years. Almost all the benefits of economic growth have gone to the richest 5%, most of that to the richest 1%. Education has now become the critical determinant of a person's ability to earn enough money to support a family. The big jobs, big employers in Houston in the 1970s, Hughes Tool Company, Cameron Iron Works, good blue-collar jobs for someone with a strong right arm and willing to work hard. Those jobs have disappeared. Here are the actual figures. In 1970s, about two-thirds, three-fourths of all jobs in 1970, when was that? 1973? Three-fourths of all jobs required no more than high school. One-third of all the jobs in America in the 1970s were available to people who had dropped out of high school. And here it is today. Oops. Where 65% of all the jobs that are going to be created in America require education beyond high school. What you earn depends on what you have learned in a way that has never been as true before as it is today. Growing inequalities predicated above all else on access to quality education. The public understands that. We asked in our survey last year, for a person to be successful in today's economy, is it necessary to get an education beyond high school, or are there many ways to succeed with no more than a high school diploma? Two-thirds of all Houstonians said you've got to get education beyond high school. I fight a losing battle with people who say, if only those Latinos and African Americans valued education the way the Anglos and the Asians do, there would be no problem. Everyone would get the education they need. So I can break this down by ethnicity, and here's what you find. Latinos and African Americans, even more than Asians and much more than Anglos, recognize you've got to get education beyond high school. If they are not getting that education, it is demonstrably not because they don't value the education or understand its importance. It's because of what concentrated poverty does to your ability to do well in school and to acquire the skills that this new economy requires. So theme number one is a growing inequality in Houston predicated above all else on access to quality education. I tell people the most important institution of higher education in Houston is not Rice University, wonderful and important as Rice is, it's the community college system. That's where we take kids coming out of high school with no skills and connect them to the technical jobs of the 21st century to the extent that we do. It's a central challenge as we go forward. The other, at the same time, has come this remarkable, fundamental, irreversible transformation in the ethnic composition of the Houston, the Texas, and the American population. As quickly as I can, why here, why now? Here's the story of America in the decades from the 1820s to 2000s. The big story is that between 1492 and 1965, 82% of all the human beings on the face of this earth who came to American shores, 82% came from Europe. Another 12% were Africans brought here originally as slaves to serve the Europeans. There was a handful of Chinese and Japanese working as farmers and laborers in California and Hawaii. This nation was an amalgam of European nationalities. In the last period of those first three waves of immigration, 15.9 million immigrants poured into this country between 1890 and 1914, coming from Southern and Eastern Europe, and they weren't Protestants, they were Catholics and Jews, and we passed this remarkable law in 1924 to restrict immigration to Northern Europeans, and for 40 years there was virtually no immigration. The law could not survive the shifts of consciousness for the civil rights movements. Kennedy's assassination was a great champion of immigration. In 1965, Congress changed the law. We thought nothing would change because immigration was a thing of the past. For 40 years, there's been no immigration in America. And we continue the hallmark of American immigration policy, which is family reunification. We're in the business of reuniting families. So the Congress was saying, we're going to get rid of this law, but nothing's going to change. And if anyone does come, they'll be related to those who are already here. And then it added another provision. It said, well, if you're a professional of exceptional ability, or if you have skills that are demonstrably needed in a short supply, you too can come to the head of the line. And Congress, in its debates in the 50s and early 60s, was saying, we need to open the door for some more British doctors, some more German engineers. It never occurred to anyone that there were going to be African doctors, Indian engineers, Chinese computer programmers who would be able for the first time in the 20th century to come to America. Law was changed in 1965. It's been called one of the great inadvertent acts that the U.S. Congress has ever passed, in a body known for its inadvertent acts and its unintended consequences. The world changed. During the 1960s, 3.5 million immigrants were coming to this country. Only 38% were from Europe. 1970s, 5 million came. Only 18% were Europeans. 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, 10 million immigrants per decade have been coming to America. 88% coming from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. And the United States, that throughout all of our history had been an amalgam of European nationalities, is rapidly becoming a microcosm of the world. The first nation in history that can say, we are a free people and we come from everywhere. It's a remarkable change. I mean, the same moment as the American economy is becoming fully integrated into a single global world economic system, America, a microcosm of the world. Immigration is network driven. You go where you know people. Two cities, Los Angeles and New York, are still the great immigration capitals of the world, of America. 1/3 of all the foreign-born residents of the United States live in or around those two great cities, followed by lesser magnet gateway cities, Miami, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, followed right after Houston by San Diego, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Boston, Atlanta, spreading to every city and town across America. No city has been transformed as fully, as completely, as suddenly, as irreversibly as Houston, Texas. This city, throughout all of our history, was a biracial southern city, dominated and controlled in an automatic, take-it-for-granted way by white men. And in the space of the last 30 years has become the single most ethnically diverse major metropolitan area in the entire country. Here are the statistics, the census data here, the 3 decades of the oil boom years. There was our biracial world. In 1960, there were 1.23 million people living in Harris County, Texas. 74% of us were Anglos, 20% African Americans, 6% Hispanics, less than 0.5% were Asians. During the oil boom years of the 60s and 70s, Anglos were pouring into Houston. This is where the jobs were, while the rest of you guys up in the Northeast were having your Carter malaise and your stagflating 70s. Houston was booming. By 1980, Houston became the 4th largest city in America, still an overwhelmingly Anglo city. And then after the oil bust of 1982, the Anglo population of Harris County stopped growing. And all the growth of this, the most rapidly growing city in America, all of it has been the influx of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. Here are the last 3 decades. Oh, there it is. Anglo population has actually dropped. There are fewer Anglos in Harris County today than there were 10 years ago, fewer 10 years ago than 20 years ago. African American population has grown by about 20% per decade, keeping pace with the population growth of the county as a whole, brought about by African and Jamaican immigration, brought about by the great remigration of middle-class African Americans from northern cities back to southern cities, Atlanta first, Houston second. African American population keeping pace, and then surging populations of Latinos and Asians. And by 2010, Harris County was now 43% Latino, 38% Anglo, 18% African American, 8% Asian. I'm about to show you what we honestly believe is the single most ethnically diverse major metropolitan area in the country. I'm sorry, the single most ethnically diverse county, Fort Bend County, is 21% Asian, 23% Latino, 21% African American, 34% Anglo. You can't get closer to 1/4, 1/4, 1/4 than that. And that's what is so interesting about Houston is that we have a more even distribution among the 4 great communities of America than any of the other multi-ethnic melting pot cities. Very few Asians in Miami, very few Hispanics in San Francisco, there are very few African Americans in Los Angeles. This is where the 4 communities meet in greater balance, greater equality, all of us minorities, all of us called on to build something new under the sun, a truly successful, inclusive, equitable, united, multi-ethnic society that will be Houston and Texas and America as the 21st century unfolds. I'll show you that in just a second. This is Montgomery County to the north of us, still an overwhelming Anglo county. It was 80% Anglo, added a whole bunch of Anglos, and is now 70% Anglo because it added Latinos and others even faster. Here is another way to envision this. This is Harris County in 1980. There are 1,320 census tracts in Harris County, and in blue are all the census tracts in 1980 that the census counted as majority Anglo census tracts. In red are the majority African American. That's of course the African American corridor, the 3rd ward and the 5th ward. Keep your eye on this. It's not going to change for the next 40 years. The hyper-segregation of blacks that continues in the inner city, now beginning to change for important reasons that we may have a chance to talk about. And then along the ship channel was a segundo barrio where the Latinos were, and a very few places in 1980 around the Beltway in that olive color with no majority. Okay, so that's 1980. Here's 1990. Latinos, surging population heading north and east, and now more and more of these counties with census tracts with no majority around the Beltway. Here it is in 2000, and here it is today. Isn't that incredible? With no one having planned this, no one consulted with me before all these people came. Houston finds itself at the forefront of the demographic transformation that's occurring across all of America, nowhere more clearly seen or more sharply articulated than in Houston, Texas. And it's not just numbers, it's also ages. So I've got over here babies on the left and old folks on the right. Stop. 12 different, are you actually controlling it up there, not me? Ah. Okay. That's right. Boy, I am good. This is okay. All right, 12 different age categories, from under the age of 5 to over the age of 75. And here, somewhat to my chagrin, is where the Anglos are in Harris County. Ladies and gentlemen, the baby boom. It's not until you reach people over the age of 63 that a majority of folks in Harris County, Texas, are still Anglos. And at each younger age group, the percentage of Anglos plummets. The percentage of African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and above all Latinos surges. And that's where everybody else is. 70% of everybody in Harris County, Texas today under the age of 20, 19 years old and younger, 70% are African American and Latino. The two groups overwhelmingly the most likely to be living in poverty. We know what poverty does to your ability to succeed in the public schools. I tell anyone who will listen, it is a safe statement to make that if Houston's African American and Latino young people are unprepared to succeed in the global knowledge economy of the 21st century that requires solid education beyond high school, if they are not ready to succeed, it is hard to envision a prosperous future for Houston. That is who we are and will be as the 21st century unfolds. And the other point to make is that this is a done deal. Close the borders, build your fence, close off America from ever getting any more, round up your 10 million people you think are here illegally and send them wherever you. 60-year-old Anglos are not going to be making a whole lot more babies. I tell people we'll do the best we can. We'll work on it every chance we get. You can go to the bank on this, right? No force in the world is going to stop Houston or Texas or America from becoming more African American, more Asian, more Latino, and less Anglo as the 21st century unfolds. Nothing in the world can stop that. So the only question our generation has been given is, okay, how do we make this work? How do we ensure that this diversity becomes a tremendous asset that can be for this city as we position ourselves in the global economy, the second largest port in the country, the sixth largest port in the world, the gateway to the global marketplace? and make sure it doesn't end up tearing us apart and becoming a major liability, reducing rather than enhancing our competitiveness in the global economy, much depends how this generation speaks to these tremendously interesting, remarkable convergence of forces. So this is Harris County. I think the next one is United States. Okay, this is the United States today. Still an overwhelmingly Anglo country, but the same pattern, of course. Older folks are disproportionately Anglo. This is where everybody else is. And the census actually announced about 6 months after they published this chart, all of our estimates now tell us of everybody across the entire country who are under the age of 6, the majority are now African American, Latino, and Asian. And then the census says, you want to know what America will look like in 2050? Let's assume no immigration. So we'll just go by those pesky actuarial tables that most of us at my age are not happy about. And we can tell you, here's what America will look like in 2050, just by actuarial tables alone. And that is very close to Houston, Texas today. So it really is fair to say how Houston navigates this transition will have enormous significance, not just for the Houston future, but for the American future. This is where the American future is going to be worked out. We are there first. We are where all of America will be in about 25 years. This is the American future here now. How we manage this, what kind of message we send to the rest of the country about what America can be as this unfolding process occurs, as the 21st century unfolds, will have enormous significance, I think, not just for us, but more broadly for the kind of a country that we're going to build together in the 21st century. We did a special survey over the years of health experience. I'm going to just show a few examples of what we're learning about the environmental issues. This was a question that said, this classic question that is a very good measure apparently of basic health. It says, is your current state of health these days excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? 20% of Houstonians say their health is only fair or poor. And the question we were asking in a report that we just published about 2 years ago called What Accounts for Health Disparities is what predicts those 20% who say their health is only fair or poor. And one of the things that predicts it is whether you live in or around what the TCEQ has designated as the APWL, the Air Pollution Watch list. And the next slide shows that, I think. How would you, the percent who say their health is excellent or good drops dramatically. The percent who say fair or poor, I'm sorry, good, opposite, right? Actually, that's right. So it's the 25% who say their health is only fair or poor in the APWL districts, going down to 19%. You live in the APWL areas, that's along the ship channel, the poorer areas of the city on the east side. People are much more likely to be minorities, often older, much less likely to have resources of various sorts. So we did a regression testing all of that, and very quickly the next slide shows the forces that predict the percentage who are going to say my health is only fair or poor. You can see education compared to less than high school. It's striking and interesting to note, by the way, that having a high school diploma gives you no improvement in health compared to having been a high school dropout, but some college, and of course a college degree, has enormous impact. It's a reminder again that not having a high school diploma does not give you access to jobs that can support a family in the 21st century. Income, the more income you have, the more healthy you are, the less likely you are to say your health is poor. If you're African American, everything being controlled, you're much more likely to say your health is poor. The most interesting thing also is if you have health insurance, everything being controlled and equal, having health insurance significantly improves your health and your access to quality health care. And it is a terrible scandal, obviously, in this state that we have left $1.5 billion on the table because we don't like Obamacare. And the result is Houston has the Texas Medical Center, the greatest medical complex in the world, and we have the highest percentage of children without health insurance of any major city in America. And not having health insurance has real consequences. But then with everything controlled, including health insurance, significant predictor whether you live in or around those APWL zip codes. Exposure to toxic chemicals and air pollution has real consequences for health. And now the other final point. Houston, suddenly we are in a world where environmental issues that we used to think of as anti-business, anti-growth, we now recognize increasingly are absolutely essential to Houston's prosperity in the 21st century. What will be the source of Houston's wealth? Houston's location in the East Texas oil fields accounted for everything in Houston's prosperity in the 20th century. It's going to count for less and less, and eventually for zilch in the 21st century. What will be the source of Houston's wealth? Biotech with that incredible medical center, bio-nanotech with nanotechnology at Rice, superconductivity at U of H, bio-nano-infotech, bio-nano-info-envirotech. The source of wealth for Houston in the 21st century will have to do with attracting the best and the brightest people in America, working at the cutting edge of knowledge, able to put that knowledge into commercial ventures. The resource of the knowledge economy is housed between the ears of the best and the brightest people in America who can live anywhere. And suddenly, quality of life issues, never important for Houston while our location in the East Texas oil fields counted for everything, is now increasingly recognized as central to the pro-growth agenda for this city in the 21st century. And Houston has made enormous progress in a whole variety of different ways, in a much more beautiful and greener and attractive place, and probably one of the transformative events in Houston's history that will be recorded 50 years from now, what happened in 2012, when the citizens of Houston voted by 69% to tax ourselves $100 million, to be matched by $150 million, we hope, in private monies, to take those 10 bayous that in typical Houston fashion were concretized in the cheapest possible way by the Army Corps of Engineers to serve as drainage ditches for our flooding problems during the 1970s and 80s. No one thought of these as amenities of any value. We got a flooding problem, we're a business town, get the water out of here as fast as possible, concretize those creeks. We voted to build 250 miles of linear parks, of bike trails and jogging trails along all 10 of the bayous to link them together so that half of all Houstonians will be within 3/4 of a mile of green space, and Houston will be one of the greenest cities in America. Would have been inconceivable 10 years ago. And it is a part of a new Houston taking shape before our eyes, a new openness, a new awareness that environmental protection is essential to turning Houston into a place that can attract the talent that will grow the businesses of Houston in the 21st century. And one particularly interesting issue that I know you guys are all dealing with has to do with the fact that Houston is the most spread out, least dense, most automobile-dependent city in America. We think. My friends in Phoenix say, oh no, we're the most automobile-dependent. Houston, the city of Houston covers 600 square miles. It has a grand total of 2.1 million people. You know how big 600 square miles is? You could put inside the city limits of Houston, Texas, simultaneously, I kid you not, the cities of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and Philadelphia. Those 4 cities literally fit inside the city limits at 600 square miles. That is the city of Houston. And they contain among them 5.5 million people. We have 2 million people in the city of Houston. And then you go out to the greater Houston metropolitan area, the 9-county CMSA. There's, it's all there. I think there's Harris County, and then down there to the southwest of us is the most ethnically diverse county in the country. Okay, that 9-county area that is the CMSA of Houston covers 9,400 square miles. Do you know how big that is? That is almost as large as the entire state of Massachusetts, and considerably larger than the state of New Jersey. This is the blob that ate East Texas. Houston was built on a crummy little bayou, 50 miles from any natural barrier in any direction, no mountains, no forests, no rivers, a developer's dream, built by, for, and on behalf of the automobile, made possible by air conditioning, and we spread everywhere. And we have created a civilization totally predicated on the automobile. And so we've been asking people in our surveys, how happy are you with this? If you could live any kind of life that you wanted in Houston, what would you choose? And let me just show you very quickly what we find. Almost any way you ask the question. We asked it in 3 different ways, in 3 different years. First was, if you could live in any kind of area that you wanted, what would you prefer? A single-family residential area or an area with a mix of developments, including shops, workplaces, and restaurants? 50-50 split. Then we said if you could live in any kind of housing that you wanted, which would you prefer? A single-family house with a big yard where you would need to drive everywhere you want to go, or a smaller, more urbanized home within walking distance of shops and workplaces? And the majority are now saying more walkable urbanism. And then we said, how should we spend our transportation monies? Spend them on improving, on expanding roads and highways, or spend them on improving bus and rail? And you get, again, a 50-50 split. And so this is what they call a robust finding. However you ask the question, half of all the people in this, the most automobile-dependent county in the world, are saying, give me a choice. And what's happening here, I think, is twofold. Number one, we are a different folk than we were when we all went out to the suburbs in the 60s and 70s. In the census of 1970, 2/3 of all American households consisted of families with children at home. The baby boom was still going. And you have children at home, you go out to the suburbs because they need green spaces and schools. Today, less than 1/3 of all households in America have children at home. Less than 1/3. Whole bunches of us are empty nesters. The kids have grown up. I'm in my late 40s, early 50s. I work downtown. I love the ballet and the symphony. Do I still want to have to drive 2 hours every day? Do I want to have to mow the lawn? Give me a choice, America, Houston. And whole bunches of the people we're trying to attract, these young creatives, sociologists talk about them as the postponing generation. They're coming into the city. They don't want to, they seem to be in no rush to have children, to turn us into grandparents. They don't want to live out in the suburbs. And if they have children, they're going to have 1.9 instead of 3.7. They want the life, the diversity, the streetscape, the opportunities to meet people that come from only urban living. And the fastest growing age segment of the American population today are men and women over the age of 85. Growing faster than any other segment. And we have not seen anything yet. Wait till that baby boom, now turning 70, starts moving into those years. I'm not sure I want all those 85-year-olds having to drive everywhere in Houston, Texas. And it's clear that we're in a different place. As I tell my students, you graduate from Rice at the age of 21. You have 60 years of vigorous adult life ahead of you. Sociologists talk about the young old. You don't get to be old until your late 60s, your late 80s, early 90s. 65 is the old 45, 45 is the old 25, 25 is the old 10, right? It's a new reality, and we're going to live different lives at different points in our lives, and we're going to want different choices. And this is a city in the process of reinventing itself and thinking about what do we need to be if we're going to succeed together in the 21st century. And one other reason for this new interest in urban life is this is east of Main Street in 1978. Nothing but surface parking. We worked downtown if we had to, but we got out of there as fast as we could. Land developers buying up the land, waiting for the price to get right. 4 years later comes the total collapse of the economy with the oil boom collapse. Why did we go out to the suburbs? I rest my case, right? There was nothing in the city. Here's exactly the same place 33 years later, right? You all know what all that is. And this is suddenly a city. Suddenly we are in the process, as I say, of reinventing ourselves, of remaking Houston for the 21st century. And what you guys are doing is so central to that whole process of helping us rethink and providing the new options and choices that Houstonians are increasingly asking for as we work together for the 21st century. And I think that's all I want to say. I just want to remind us of glass slide fast. So it's the new economy where education has become absolutely critical. It's a multi-ethnic world. Next one. That reminds us that this is never in human history has there been a truly multi-ethnic society that has worked. This is our chance. This is the world of America in the 21st century as we become a microcosm of all the world's religions, of all the world's people. And then we know that there'll be another 1 million people moving into Harris County in the next 20 years, another 3.5 million in the greater Houston metropolitan area. Can we accommodate another 1 million people in Harris County and build a more beautiful, a greener, a healthier, a more attractive city with 5 million folks as opposed to 4 million? That's the great challenge, and that's the great opportunity that all of us have been given. And the role that you guys are playing at the Houston-Galveston Area Council is absolutely at the forefront and central to the kind of America, the kind of Houston that we will build together in the 21st century. Thank you all very, very much. Great honor to be here. Thank you.